Conversation now. Trade, Industry and Competition Minister Pakstau has announced Sizekhaya Holdings as the preferred bidder for the lucrative National Lottery license. The company will run all the national lottery services for the next 8 years for an eye-watering 180 billion rand. Sizekhaya Holdings is 50% owned by gaming and online betting company Goldrush, which is owned by Amazulu Football Club owner Sandile Zungu. The KZN Consortium will take over from Ituba from the 1st of June. The bidding process has been marred by extensive litigation. Winanjalo, you'll remember, one of the bidders took the matter to the Gauteng High Court, alleging that Minister Tau had favoured Ituba by delaying the announcement and deciding to issue a temporary licence. Parties like the EFF and BOSA have also been calling for more transparency around the contract and bidding process to rule out political interference and conflict of interest. Well, let's stay with the story. Joining us now to give us their commentary around this. In fact, they've already issued a statement, the EFF National Spokesperson, Snawa Tambo. Mr. Tambo, good evening to you. Thanks for your time. I'm going to go straight to part of what your statement says tonight, and that is that the minister has acted in a corrupt manner. Explain those statements. In what way?
Greetings, greetings to the viewers. Look, we feel that the minister has acted in a corrupt manner because if you remember, you and I had this conversation, I think just last week, if not a couple of weeks ago, about the possible corrupt interference by a bid evaluation committee member, two bid evaluation committee members rather, who are part and parcel of the awarding of this 180 billion tender to Sizekhaya, which is a subsidiary of Goldrush Consortium. One having attended the 25th anniversary of Goldrush Consortium's gala dinner, and another owning machines which belong to Goldrush Consortium in their establishment in the city of Xoli. Beyond this corrupt sort of relationship and collusion between bid evaluation committee members and now the winning bidder is the link by Sandile Zungu, who is the Amazulu FC owner, but also a former hopeful for chairpersonship of the African National Congress in KZN, and Moses Tembe. Now, this goes directly against the Lotteries Act, which speaks against political exposure, but also Goldrush Consortium had, at the time when we had this conversation, spoken about expanding its operations, which speaks to what we view as an inability to run the National Lottery in its current state, which also goes against the Lotteries Act. So we are not perplexed that Pakstau has rewarded Sizekhaya with this contract and ultimately Goldrush Consortium, as we had warned. We are perhaps amused at the brazenness of the corruption by Pakstau to do so despite our warnings. And we have been in consultation with our legal counsel this entire afternoon, and I expect that we'll have something quite major to announce to block this decision by tomorrow. Well,
let me tease out some of what you have just said now, that a major announcement could be forthcoming from the EFF. You say that your lawyer, whilst they looking at all of this with a view to possibly bringing a judicial review of this decision, you also may possibly bring forth the interdicting of the awarding of this contract. How serious are you about that last bit, the interdicting of the award of this contract?
Look, let me put it this way. It's as serious as my membership of the EFF that it is highly likely that the economic freedom fighters will interdict this process. The unfortunate part, and we say in the statement that our legal options are not limited to this possible interdict, is that this contract is supposed to be awarded on the 1st of June 2026, which means there's just about 2 days for this process to reach resolution or for us to take it upon judicial review. Now, the concern that all South Africans should have is what impact this will have on the National Lottery and its duty to the people of South Africa, which includes funding of worthy beneficiaries of grants in terms of sporting institutions, institutions that uplift communities, infrastructure projects that it is involved in as well. Because the National Lottery is not only about gambling, but it has those statutory obligations of providing funding to institutions that uplift society and provide money to where these small and medium-sized enterprises. So our concern is, what is that going to mean in terms of consequences for the functioning of the National Lottery? Will the former operator be given an opportunity to continue? What will be the mechanism in terms of continued operations? And that is the type of conversations we're having with our legal team. Because as much as we want to stop the ANC corruption, which seeks to award this contract to Sandile Zungu and Moses Tembe so that the African National Congress can secure funding for its internal elective conferences in the 2026 and 2029 elections, we also want to ensure that the National Lottery remains operational to the benefit of the people. So we must balance those two scenarios.
Yeah, as we end the conversation, some people will be wondering, why should South Africans take the EFF seriously, given your behavior in Parliament yesterday during the question and answer session of the President, if they perhaps harbour those kinds of thoughts that whilst on the one hand they want to be taken seriously, how do you juxtapose this with the theatrics that we saw in Parliament, especially after a commitment that said the EFF is no longer going to behave in such a fashion in the 7th administration?
Look, I don't think there was anything untoward with the behavior of the economic freedom fighters yesterday in the National Assembly. And I'm sure that is up and open for debate. But the principal concern raised by the EFF, which I think is something worthy to raise, is that there were unidentifiable armed individuals in the National Assembly, which is constituted by democratically elected members who represent political parties voted by the South African people. Now, that is a security threat that must be raised as a caution. It was later considered by the Deputy Speaker, Anna Lotriet, that those were the protectors of the Deputy President and the President of South Africa, and they were later ejected. But this came after the irrational removal of members of Parliament of the EFF who were raising that same concern. So we were simply stating that you remove members of Parliament for raising a concern about unidentifiable armed individuals in Parliament. And now that you've been able to identify who they are and the impropriety of their presence, bring back those members of Parliament who raised those concerns. So there's nothing necessarily untoward that the EFF did yesterday. I don't think it's a backtracking or betrayal of the commitment to be a positive and constructive opposition. It's one of those things that were unnecessary and that should have been handled differently by the Deputy Speaker. And we have advised her as well, not following the footsteps of the likes of Mngambi or Ngakula with impatience and brutality in presiding over the House. And I do not foresee it occurring moving forward.
Now, Tambo, thank you very much for your time. National Spokesperson of the Economic